Glad to see everyone out. My name is David Schoaf, KC4X. And why don't we introduce ourselves? Where do we want to start? Right there.
Doc, WB4QIZ. KB4SJ.
Terry, AK4D. Jeff, AC4YN. Steve, K2MLN.
Bill, WB4OTY.
Ken, KM4NF2.
Kathy, KM4OCS.
I'm Rick, no phone number. It's my first time. I'm glad to join up and pick up radio.
Glad to have you, Rick. Good to meet you.
And first meeting for me, Nick Davies, KM4ACT.
Very good. Thank you. Terry?
Steve, WA3RTC. Harold, N4HER.
Mary, brand new, KN4LKO.
Hey, Mary. Good to meet you. Good to see you.
Judson, KG40HQ.
David, W4OIL.
Henry, W4HHS.
Jarvis, KG7SU.
Harlan, W1HRC.
Mary, KM4WPO.
Bob, W3AVB.
Ron, KN4RKD.
Jim, KJ4FIN.
Mark, KM4TUK.
Bobby, AA9AU.
W4NAU.
Michael, K4OLD.
Okay, very good. Welcome to all. And I think, let's see, Dale, do you know who, anybody pass an exam tonight?
Well, let's see if we can, as far as the testing goes, we have a couple people. Mike, we'll embarrass you and have you stand up. Mike got his extra tonight, so congratulations to him. And Timothy, KM4HQN, I think it is. He had to leave. He was on vacation, but his wife's back now, so he's got to get back home. So he could. Again, thank you, folks, along with Mike, N4VE. Again, if these folks weren't here, we wouldn't have the testing. This room would probably be half full, and you wouldn't have as many people to talk to. So thanks again for all your special work coming in. And we also had Bill that was here, KK4ZIU. Right?
Yes.
So I think that covered it. So we had 2 tonight that passed.
Very good.
So the repeater report, I won't mention anything on. We'll wait till we get in the presentation. It should answer many of the questions.
Okay, good. Thank you, Dale. Dale will be back in a minute with a lot more information. And as far as our business meeting, those of you that wonder what go on at the business meetings, we discuss the business of the club. And if you look in the newsletter, you'll find the minutes from those meetings. You'll find the minutes of this meeting as well. And this is a fine newsletter that Don Edwards puts together for us. Don's back in the back, WS4NC, and it has lots of good information in it. Most of it's right. We had a little issue with our program last month. It was supposed to be on Amelia Earhart, some of the equipment that she used, and the fact that it. Oh, they're good. Okay. But I'm told by Doca, he thinks that the Amelia Earhart guy got lost just like she did. He didn't make it, those of you that were here. That's right. That's right. But I will tell you that next month's program, which there will be something on the website and I think it's in the newsletter as well, on satellite reception. Let's see, satellites you may be able to hear. Jeff Rudy has put this together, and he's got about 30 of these printed out front and back, but this resource is located also on the web at our w4nc.com website. So if you come and pick one of these up until they're all gone, and if you don't get one, then do go to the website and print it out. I'm not even sure I put my name on that.
It's on there. I just put it on there.
Okay, good. Thank you.
That document came from the presenter. He sent that to me to hand out to the club. He called it homework for him before the meeting.
Okay.
And it's really just information and front and back of a page of
Good information.
everything about the satellites that we haven't done, and just terminology and things maybe we can use.
And I rather suspect the first time you hit a satellite and make a contact, it'll make your blood run hot. I think I've heard that sort of thing. Anyway, a lot of good information in the newsletter. I think we have some or had some here, but that's all available on the website as well, so do take advantage of that. Also, Kent, our treasurer, had to work tonight. It does happen, but he told me that we have $3,660 in the bank, which is a good place to have $3,660. We're hanging in there. I think the real term is let's buy me something, but that's not going to happen. Harlan, would you please step up and have your say?
It's always easy when you're spending, when you're spending somebody else's money, it's always easy.
Yes.
Hey, I don't like Mike, but I guess
For the government.
I think so. God, I don't want to stand this close to him. I have to stand this close to him again? Okay.
You should bathe.
I know. Yeah. So not Saturday yet. Forsyth Amateur Oxcom. It used to be Aries. We now call ourselves Oxcom. Again, the reason for that is because that's the direction the state's going. They consider all amateur communications for emergency services to be auxiliary communications. Hence the term Oxcom. DHS has done the same thing. So Thursday nights is the Oxcom net. Please check in. A lot of training occurs in 30 minutes. We do have a lot of information that gets put out. That's not the only training we have available or that we're going to have. We have classroom training as well in November 10th. We're going to hold a Ecom Net controller course that's going to walk you through being an Oxcom Net controller. There are a lot more forms that are involved. There's a lot of information we have to deal with. And you're going to learn how to make a communications plan, because it's something you will have to do. If we're ever deployed to that realm, they will look at you and go, we need your plan. And you may have 15 minutes to write that plan. I did one the other night for the Dixie Classic Fair as part of the incident management team, and it took me, just for the communications plan, about 20 minutes. But that includes everybody. That's law enforcement, fire, EMS, etc. in that plan. And so it takes a little bit to put together, even when I'm looking at last year's. So if you've never done it before, that's what this course is going to do. Please attend. The ICS courses, 100, 200, 700, 800. If you haven't taken them, please do. They're available online. An additional class we would like you to take, if you have the availability and you want to be part of or to be the senior operator at the EOC, is ICS 300. Now that is a classroom only course, and it's 3 days long. There's also another course that will be offered next year, and that is the DHS Oxcom course. I encourage you to apply for it and take it. It is held in at Charlotte, at the Charlotte Fire Academy. They hold it annually. It is limited to 30 people. The nice thing is the state normally pays for your hotel. So all you've got to worry about is your fuel down and your food. You get fed lunch at the academy, so it's whatever you want to munch for breakfast and your dinner. It's a pretty decent deal. Again, it's 3 days of training, but you do get the Oxcom certification. Next item, Tour to Tanglewood, September 22nd, 23rd. we desperately need people still. We need a few more operators for SAG vehicles. That's radio equipped, two-way, amateur communicated vehicles. We also need radio operators, people to sit at rest stops. I need some more people for the net control station as well. We're going to be operating out of a integrated command post this year. So it's going to be set up differently than we've done in the past because we're operating a more complex operation. We've involved a whole lot more jurisdictions, and we've picked up a whole lot more. I've been assigned as the incident commander for the event, and we're interfacing with law enforcement, EMS, in these 4+ jurisdictions that we're dealing with. So again, I need as many operators as I can. I may or may not be able to sit at a radio during that weekend. I'll have one, but I may not be able to actually sit at the radio itself and operate depending on what's going on, since I have to interface with all the other jurisdictions. So sign up, go to the W4NC website, look at the Aries page, look for the sign up genie. It gives you instructions for Tour de Tanglewood. It's easy to do. Anybody that's done it will tell you it's not that complicated. If you want to sign up as a SAG, go into that section, radio operator, which is the rest stops, the shadows, etc. Go into that one. If you're a motorcycle owner and you have a radio equipped bike and you want to be a motorcycle escort, sign up there. I can use a few more of those. And if you need to be want to be a net controller, sign up under radio operator and just in the comments section tell me you want to be at net control. Okay? Any questions? Super. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Harlan. One of the things you guys might have noticed when you came in, or maybe you didn't notice, I don't know where to put this thing. I know what they're saying in the back where to put it. We have here a suggestion box. And simple as it is, it's a suggestion box. And you can put whatever kind of suggestion you might have in here. Write it on your own paper. There's paper and pen up here. Write down what you'd like to hear as a program. Maybe we can come up with that. But we need your ideas, and here's a good place to drop them off.
Launch Harlan out of torpedo tube is not a good suggestion.
No, but it's a thought. All right, well, without further ado, I did want to mention one more time our business meeting next Monday night at 6:30 is about the time we gather, and we eat over at 66 Pizza. It's a good time. It's a nice place to meet where we can shut the doors and it's quiet. We can talk to each other, and we do conduct quite a bit of club business there and talk about the Ham Fest that's coming up, Christmas dinner that's coming up. By the way, Christmas dinner, we're going back to the Mexican place again. Everybody that was there had such a good time. The food was good, the service was good. Why not go back there? So I went by and saw them last week, and we nailed it down. We're going to have the room exclusively. Last year, I think we had almost 80 people there, 76 or so. So we've got the whole thing to ourselves. Let's come and plan on having a good time. That'll be December the 3rd. First Monday. First Monday. It's the first Monday. You know, here we are on the second Monday, and this thing's got to come open here. I do believe December 3rd. Okay. Thanks much for that. All right. I've said enough. Without further ado, let's hear about our repeaters. Thank you, Dale.
Thank you, David.
I don't want all of these. This one.
Before we get started, see a lot of new faces and some folks that have been here for quite a while with the club, well-seasoned hams. How many are pretty well familiar with the repeater's design, repeater operation? Raise your hands. Okay, quite a few of you. How many of you are new to repeaters, or another word for it is amateur radio relay station? So we have a couple of those too. Okay, the reason I asked that, I'm going to try to address the questions for the new folks and questions folks may have as far as even why does this happen on repeater interference. So I'll take questions throughout the presentation and also at the end as we go forward. Apologize for some of the slides. We'll try to do the best we can, but again, it's amateur type of presentation. Okay, let's see if our pointer works first. Okay, as far as the agenda goes, it looks like there's a lot on here, and there is. Try to break this out as far as what the general flow is for the repeaters.
Zone blocker.
Zone blocker, okay.
Stay in the zone.
You got to stay in the zone. See, we already started off messing it up, so no, thank you. We'll talk a little bit about the repeaters and get a little bit off subject in some areas. We have some photos, not the least of which I'll mention, the one above. That is the actual date, back 2009, just a gorgeous, gorgeous area up on Sourtown Mountain. Our hosts are WXII. This is one of their antennas, and we're looking, I think north here. You can see kind of a road going down, gravel road, and a small storage shack there. Our repeater is back over, I know I brought this for some reason. The batteries will probably go out. Yeah, the repeater where we were located is back up in this area here. There's a building, and you'll see some pictures of it later on, but just a gorgeous area. First question that probably comes to mind, how high are we? The repeater antenna that we had at WXII is at 2,480 feet, rounded out to 2,500 feet above sea level. One of the towers, and the main tower goes up, I think, ours was on a 30-foot tower, that goes up, I think, 820 feet, so you can do the math from there. Oh, we've got a professional type of pen now. If I don't ruin my eyes, oh, this is even better. Thank you, sir. Well, I could trade it. Who was that from? So, Harold will come after me. Anyway, let's go back here. Talk a little bit about what repeaters are. Basically, it's an automatic relay station for amateur radio. Some of our, let me find some of the FARC repeaters, Forsyth Amateur Radio Club, for those of you that are new. The three repeaters that the club hosts for all of you. Talk a little about temporary repeater sites that we have and why we have them. Some repeater functions, add-ons, operation, user codes that you have. There'll be one user code I gave to David earlier. A little bit about Echolink, then we'll summarize things, have some questions, and close it on out. Okay, there's the team, Forsyth Amateur Radio Technical Society here. See a notice? And that's made up of myself, David, Jerry, Steve, Jim, a number of other folks. We had to try to get a catchy phrase and, of course, have an acronym, so that's what we chose. But those are your folks that take care of the, in Harlan, of course, too, that take care of the repeaters as far as administratively and mostly technically. No, we're not, but you know there could be with all the M&A mergers and acquisitions, maybe there can be something politically they'll come up here in the future. But thanks for bringing that up. Okay, one of the key things to remember here: we're not paid. We're a volunteer organization, and we appreciate all your member support. That's in terms not only club dues, sometimes donations to the repeaters, but more than anything, your time. You can trade your time doing a lot of other things, but many of you have chosen to try to help out with the Amateur Radio Club and the repeaters, and that's much appreciated. Again, I mentioned earlier we maintain 3 repeaters, and we'll focus on the repeater systems we have today. May mention a couple things about the future. Again, what is a repeater? It's just really a relay station or range extender. And I'll show you in a little while. You always hear you want to get your antennas up as high as possible. Well, if you have a repeater attached to it, that's even better, and we'll show you a little bit why that works. Incidentally, the background I chose, that's actually for a satellite. Try to give Jeff a little plug for his presentation next month. Extended communication range is what a repeater offers, and that's really for a mobile radio, a handy-talkie, or even a fixed station. You can basically extend your range for the repeater, where 2 HTs may only go line of sight 4 to 7 miles. Well, you can possibly extend that to a repeater to 100 miles or more. Plus, there's additional capabilities. Auto patch, we won't be talking about. I'll mention what that is in a minute. Echolink, linking, and so on that you can build into a repeater. Auto patch is basically a way to link Bell telephone, or what used to be Bell telephone, to a repeater with a computer in between. And that was actually used in the, I won't say the late 60s, the early 70s, all the way up till about the mid-'80s, I would say even the early '90s, prior to cell phones, where it was really neat. You can have a HT and you can make a telephone call. People would look at you strange. You'd hear the dial tone. Now that's nothing with cell phones. But that's still also available in the systems. We'll talk a little bit about why we don't have that later, or if somebody could bring up a question, I'll mention why, but I don't want to delay the presentation right now. But it's a nice function. Okay, the basic, I was going to try to come up with the diagram. I think it's the next slide, but basically the components: you need a transmitter, you need a receiver, you need the brain or a controller to basically tell the repeater what to do. Think of it as two mobile radios together, receiving on one channel for the receiver and transmitting on another channel. So a repeater always takes up 2 frequencies minimum, more if there's links. Need something called duplexers. We'll talk a little bit about that later, but think of it as a big filter that allows you to run 2 radios, receiving and transmitting, keyword, simultaneously up the same coax and antenna without any interference at all if it's tuned properly. And of course you need an antenna as well. Okay, types of repeaters that are out there now. We'll be focusing mainly on analog repeaters. There's many of you in here that are also familiar with digital repeaters. I didn't put them all up here, but the most common are DMR, which is a trademark by Motorola's Moto Turbo. There's some units out there now. Some of you folks own HTs. They're digital mobile radio equipped, where it basically connects repeaters to the internet to a backbone and allow you to be able to talk on an HT perhaps across the state or across the country. There's an ICOM variant called D-Star, which was the first to come out with a digital repeater. That's used, I think the Greensboro group has that. We don't have any D-Star units in our club or in this area. However, we do have a Yaesu Fusion machine. We have 2 of them. They're currently set up in fixed mode right now because of some firmware issues, but hopefully they'll soon be changed where we can set up the Fusion repeater so it would receive an analog signal and transmit a digital, or vice versa, or digital to digital, or currently right now analog to analog. It's kind of a neat function when it works properly. Okay, here's kind of a bad, I think I'm out of the screen again. I don't want to block the slides. Here's kind of a homemade diagram. If you have a HT talking to a mobile, again, you probably wouldn't get much more on level ground, 4 to 7 miles. If you have a hill in between, you might get 2 to 3 miles. If you put something in the middle of it, known as a tall thing, in our case the tall thing's called Saratown Mountain, you could have this thing up at roughly 2,500 feet. You could have your antenna system, keyword here, the receivers listening on frequency B, transmitters transmitting on frequency A, and you have the brains, the controller, to tell it what to do, the timing, the squelch beeps, listen for interference, block it. In some cases, if there's malicious interference, record it or fingerprint it. And I won't say much more about that, but we do watch for folks interfering with the repeater and take appropriate action. So basically, you could have an HT here set to repeater mode, go up frequency B, talk through here, and it'll come back out to frequency A, and you have a happy face on both sides. And that could be maybe 100 miles apart or 40 miles apart, depending on what it is. But that's basically how the repeater diagram would be drawn. Okay, I mentioned there's 2 frequencies earlier, and also mentioned that you have a transmitter for a repeater and a receiver operating simultaneously, keyword, on the same coax, the same antenna. Now, if you've ever accidentally transmitted at home or had some mobile come up to you, it's almost impossible to hear or transmit for either of you. Well, that's why we have a duplexer in between, and also to try to get some attenuation to make this magic work, we have something called offsets. Now, the band offset is 600 kilohertz for 2 meters we'll talk about, and appropriately 1.6 megahertz for 220, 440 for 5 megahertz split, and so on for 902 and 440 systems, which we don't have, although these 3 are in the area. Now, if you have a pretty big split, you can imagine that the interference won't be quite as bad. That's why on 440 megahertz or 70 centimeters, it's much easier to tune a system. You generally have smaller cavities, not as many cavities, because you can attenuate things much better. One of the elements of attenuation, that is, in other words, for stopping interference, is frequency separation. Others are basically the number of cavities you have, as well as the characteristics of the antenna and antenna spacing. We won't talk too much about that. Look up here at 144 megahertz, 2 meters. It's 600 kcs, basically a little more than half a megahertz, where on here you have 10 times that amount on 440. The reason I mention that, very difficult to tune properly to eliminate interference on 2 meters. However, way back in the 60s, that's what was chosen as an amateur standard, and that's what we remained with. The offset can either be above a frequency, your receive frequency, or below your receive frequency, i.e. your transmit. It's below the frequency for 145, 146 megahertz repeaters, and then the convention is its plus offset, 600 kilohertz, for 147 and above. Everywhere in the country except California. It's just the opposite, and it's been like that since the 70s, I remember, and it's still like that today too. So, no offense to anybody from California, but they insist that was the standard. Well, the rest of the country is on this standard, the minus standard. Okay, what does a repeater look like? This is pretty basic, but you have the antenna, the signal comes in here to the receiver. And you know we have to have acronyms in here, or it wouldn't be any fun. The COR just means carrier operated relay. So what does that mean? When the receiver hears a carrier, it takes the signal, changes it to DC, it operates a relay. What does the relay do? It turns on the transmitter. This is still receiving. The receiver turns its audio, feeds it into the transmitter, and of course it's impedance matched, basically, so you don't have a 4-inch pipe and a 1/2-inch pipe together. They're 2 pipes together, so the audio sounds good. And the key's a transmitter, it goes out the antenna. We show it as 2 antennas here. You can have some repeater sites with 2 antennas if you have enough spacing, usually vertical spacing. There's mathematics for that to calculate it, but generally 60 to 100 feet for the best spacing depending on the frequency. Other times you're blessed with having 1 antenna, which we have on all our repeater sites except when we do tests. So you have to have something called duplexers, which is in one of the slides going forward. I haven't gotten to it yet. One other thing you have a COR. When you transmit, the receiver hears your signal, decodes it, and keys the transmitter. Well, imagine with more and more repeaters in the area, for instance, for Sourtown Mountain 145.47 negative offset, we have one on Sourtown Mountain. It's coordinated about, I think it's about 100 some miles away to South Hill, Virginia is also on 145.47, different tone, so it won't key up that repeater when there's a band opening. Guess what? Most of you in here that have been around for a while have heard Gaffney 145.47, South Carolina. That's probably over 100 miles away. And maybe occasionally Mountain City, Tennessee, I think it is, which is probably out to your west, all on the same frequency. Thus, we have something, again, another acronym, coded, I forget what it is, a coded tone, it's a subaudible, it's a Motorola term, I forget what it stands for, but it's basically a subaudible tone private line, which is a Motorola trademark, that when activated along with your mic and your audio, you'll key up the repeater. That's what our repeater receiver listens for. In our case, 100 hertz for all our repeaters. If you don't have 100 hertz, you're not going to get in. If you have a different PL and the band's open, you might deliberately turn it off to get into Gaffney or get into South Hill, Virginia. Take advantage of that band opening, but it won't key up our repeater unless you have that. Subaudible tone is very low. It's very difficult to hear it if you try to listen on the input. Typically, those of you familiar with repeaters, something called deviation, what they used to call in CB days modulation. Some folks still call that now. That's for an AM signal where it modulates in amplitude. It deviates wide your frequency because it's called FM frequency modulation. Typically, a good a tuned HT or mobile rig as well as a repeater would have between 4.5 to 5 kilohertz max deviation. You go above that, you get some splatter and you get some interference along with some other issues. Basically, you can't understand a person. So FM is such a good quality, you try to keep it 3.5 to 5 kc. Subaudible tone is just what it means. I usually try to tune that so it's barely detectable, around 800 hertz, maybe 1 kilohertz if it's a noisy area. So if you listen, you can possibly hear it. The other thing is, there's with CTCSS, you can put that on a receiver as well. So I mentioned the case for Gaffney when the band opens. You just want to hear the Forsyth Amateur Radio Club. You've heard enough of Gaffney. Well, if you hit tone encode or tone DSQ on some of your radios, most of the newer ones, it'll listen only for 100 hertz if the repeater transmits it, which they do, and it'll only open up and you'll only hear it for Sourtown Mountain. You won't hear South Hill, Virginia or Gaffney when the band opens. 145-47 machine has been transmitting that for years. The 6.4 has some issues with that. Part of the tone encoder went out, but that'll be fixed. But that's put in there deliberately in case you only want to listen just to our machine. And there's a short delay, so you probably won't hear the squelch tail at all, but it's timed just right, about 150 milliseconds, so it'll work just well for you. Something new I won't talk about, well, new from the early 80s, digital coded squelch. Think of it as kind of like the analog subaudible tone, but I think there's about, I forget the numbers, probably at least 48 if not 72 different types of standard digital coded squelch. Kenwood, some other units, Yaesu use those. It's not used too much around here. DTMF, dual tone multiple function. It's what started off on the telephones back in, I forget when touch tone first came out, probably in the 60s, 50s. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it, Bobby. Couldn't remember, but roughly around that area. You have two tones that are mixed at one time. And all the telephones have 12 keys. If you see the ham radios, they have 16. The right-hand column being A, B, C, D. So what it does, it adds another tone, and it takes the other 4 and mixes it, so you have 16 control codes. You could use that for making telephone numbers through something I called auto patch earlier, or to control the repeater. Those of us that are control operators in the room, when something goes wrong at 12 or 1 a.m. in the morning, repeater locks up, we don't want to drive up the mountain and mess with it then, or find out you drive up there like happened 15 years ago. All due respect to our host, but they changed the locks. Forgot to tell us. So it was either calling them up at 1 a.m. in the morning, say, please, can I meet you at your house and drive up the mountain again, or let the repeater burn up. So we called them up. But they were very gracious. So if you can change, set up telemetry to listen to the tones, you can turn the repeater up and down, you can change the PL, you can change the links, you can turn it off when somebody's maliciously interfering. And here's the buttons that allow you to do that with an FT60, just for an example. Here's the tones, CTCSS tones. I forget what that is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, there's a bunch of them there. Those are the common ones. There's some other ones you can that are not published that can be used also to control the repeater. Okay, open versus closed repeaters. All the repeaters, I won't say all, the ones in this club are all open. They can have a PL or not have a PL. Ours all have PLs for the reasons I mentioned earlier, so we won't have somebody in Gaffney getting in accidentally and bringing up 2 repeaters at one time, and also to try to control things. There are closed repeaters in the area, and those are typically in large metropolitan areas, just a few, Chicago, New York, some in LA, and at times that was mainly because there was an auto patch associated with it, and with the high population, high usage, they incurred very large telephone bills, so they chose to close it. Other repeater owners would just put a cipher on the auto patch, so you'd have to put in a code to bring it up. We can use it normally. There's not too many closed repeaters around. Apologize for the quality of this, but this will try to show you a little bit what actually happens with something called a duplexer we'll talk about next, which is, think of it as a huge filter, again, to allow your transmit and receive signal to work simultaneously on the same antenna, which is pretty incredible. And this is largely a mechanical filter. I'll show you pictures of it, not electronic, mechanical. So there's some pretty neat physics, dielectric, tuning, spacing, everything that's very precise to make sure this piece of equipment works the way we want it to. Basically, a received signal comes in through the same coax, goes through the duplexer, and it's tuned. There's actually, in the cases we have, 6 of these cans, duplexers making up one set. It determines it's the received signal, blocks out all the transmit, also going up at the same time, comes down to the receiver. The brains of the controller basically says, okay, go to the transmitter, go back up, filter out any of the, it nulls out anything that goes to the transmit area, basically nulls it to ground. Otherwise, it would mess up our receiver. You wouldn't get much range at all, and it goes back out again. What is a duplexer? Duplexer is one antenna. Did I mention that? A repeater uses one antenna to simultaneously transmit and receive. The transmit and receive signals need to be isolated from each other, and it really has to be isolated. Again, we have big problems if we don't. We had a problem on 6.4 I'll talk about a little later, but one of them was a broken coax. Well, it's like having a water pipe with a hole in it, and all this water's coming out of your signal, and you wonder why things aren't working properly. So isolation is very important. Basically, just think of a duplexer as a pair of sharp filters. One is tuned for the transmit signal, one for the receive signal, as long as they are both sharing the same antenna simultaneously. Okay, here's a picture of a spectrum analyzer. I wish that was mine. Don has one like that, and thanks to Don, he was able to help us. Well, he actually did the work to retune the duplexers up on the 145/47 machine. This is a non-trivial piece of equipment. It can be between $15,000 to $20,000 to $40,000. A little bit more than we have in the budget for ham radios. Although there are some older ones, 15, 20 years old, that work quite well, that are around the $1,800 to $3,500 area that we use. Okay, what are some of the design challenges? Coordination. Southeastern Repeater Association named SERA is a volunteer body that coordinates, I forget what the number is, it's probably 1,000 repeaters or more in Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Mississippi, Tennessee, Georgia. I may have forgot of some other states, but basically they look at the frequency pair, how high it is up on the mountain, how close they are together, a whole number of different things. They put it into a software program and say, you can't put a repeater up in this area because you're too close to Raleigh. You're too close to somebody else. However, you can go on another frequency. All the 2-meter frequency pairs are full. 220 megahertz, 1.25 centimeter band just above 2 meters still has pairs. 440 is filling up, or 77 meters, but you basically coordinate with this association to make sure your repeater doesn't interfere with somebody else, or they don't interfere with you, because guess what? If you're interfering, you can't work it out on the side as hams. You go to the FCC will look and say, who's coordinated, who's not, who's ever coordinated, they'll side with them. The other repeater may have to go off the air, and it's only fair. Expenses, we talked a little bit about that. We appreciate everybody's donation. This is not a presentation to obtain donations, just to state that repeaters aren't free. We've been blessed with our host of WXII up on Sourtown Mountain, as well as Wake Forest Baptist Hospital. Jerry Miner for allowing us to use his fire tower for a temporary site. Otherwise, we'd be out of business for a while. So we're in pretty good shape. Some other clubs don't have that type of gratuity available to them. Parts and availability, that's a big one. A few years back, many of you here that are seasoned hams know you can go to Allied Electronics, Newark Electronics, and something breaks, you can go ahead, buy it, and get it. Yes, sir.
Question on coordination. I've been a ham for over a year now, and it's interesting. What coordination? Do they ever keep tabs on who's actually got a repeater that's actually working or not? Because it seems like, especially at 2 meters, there's a lot of frequencies that, especially around our Piedmont area, or I'm almost in Charlotte, there's only a few repeaters actually that seem to, even like keying them up, seem to nothing's there. So do they actually keep tabs on what's live and what's not?
They do. That's a great question. Sarah does the best they can. With all due respect to them, it's volunteer. They only have a certain number of people. They have a database. Everything used to be on paper up until I think about 3-4 years ago, and spreadsheet management, and that was tough. With I'll say probably 32 different parameters. Frequency, spacing, power attenuation, antenna gain, antenna separation, geography, to try to coordinate that with another site. So they have software to be able to help them with that now. Now they have a database where they put all this stuff in there. Personally, I think it still needs to be fine-tuned. They feel it's finalized already, but there's still some areas where I usually, whatever I send to them, I make a paper copy and a screen print so I could compare it later on when they say you didn't send that in. So they're trying to do their best, but there's still some repeaters out there that folks have down because they can't get parts, or it takes a while, if that answers your question. Yes, Kate?
You might want to look up or talk to me later about CSMA, CDMA, and the hidden transmitter problem.
Did I answer your question okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Bobby. Yes, Ken?
I think there's something called repeater book.
Yeah, that's a good point. The,
Yeah, I've got it on here, so, and sometimes you make it accurate too, so.
sure. Go ahead, Jerry.
So far, I found that the repeater book, most of, Sarah tries to keep their listings current, but they print them every, so many months, 3.
Every quarter, I think it is, yeah.
Quarterly, but sometimes that varies. But the best I've found so far, and the most accurate, is the ARL list. That is where most of the database comes from, that these other folks work. And the repeater book allows just about anybody to edit something, which sometimes is not correct. It creates some problems.
And that may be hard to see. I've
Yeah.
relied on repeater
Yes,
book.
yes. ARL listing is the best I've ever found for anything.
No, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jerry. That's true, because you'll look at some of them. If you look back, you'll see the date. There was one actually in the 90s, but 2004, this is 2018, so it hasn't been updated for a while. I had some listings out there that I've updated, have a repeater also at home, but it hasn't been reflected. So, but it's volunteers. They're doing the best they can, and I'm sure it'll get better. But like Jerry says, ARRL, or maybe check a couple lists, or get up there and key it and identify and see what's really there. So. Any other questions? Okay, parts availability, we try to do best we can. I personally resorted going to Hamfest, and Bob will say, why are you picking up that piece of junk? I said, well, I don't really want it, but it's got 2 transistors in there I can't get anymore. You can get some from China, but you got to be careful and make sure they're not. In one case, one member got it. It was a beautiful picture of our transistors, the white Bakelite with the leads coming out, and they got it back was ivory soap. So you got to be careful. Not everything, but when the price looks too good to be true for something that's normally $60 and was 15, that can happen. But it does happen. Desensing, that's a fancy word for saying interference. When you put the transmitter and receiver together, yeah, it's magic. But remember, they're operating at the same time, and if you don't have the duplexer, tuned right, if you don't have hard line, you don't have good coax and good connections, see, the shield soldered all the way around the connector, not, well, just a couple dabs on each area, the signal will get out and the transmitter will key up the receiver that's feeding it at the same time, a desensing. So what that means in English is if you try to use your HT and get into the system, you may have to have, or actually a mobile unit, and have 20 watts to get in instead of 200 milliwatts. Why? Because the receiver is being desensed. That's just one other thing for the repeater design and trying to make sure things are working well. When you first put it in, it works great. You put it on the bench and they've worked great for 3 weeks. Get it up on Sourtown Mountain and there's a rogue pager or something there, and Jerry says, I thought you tested that thing. Well, I did. Well, it's not working. So, but that's some of the fun. Interference, I think I probably said enough about that. There's different flavor. Intermodulation distortion, which is a fancy word to say you have 2 or 3 or 4 signals legitimate from a police transmitter, from another amateur radio or radio station up on Sourtown Mountain, 2 of them unnamed, that mix together, mathematics, product and sums, come up with another frequency which lands right on a repeater input. That's why David needs 50 watts to get in when he's in King, for example. Intermodulation. Paging systems, we're experiencing that right now. Talk about it a little bit later on 146.64 at Baptist Hospital. And hate to say this one, but I put it in there, rogue users or deliberate interference. Yeah, there's some folks, not in this room, but there's some folks that have chosen maybe after a beverage or two or a stolen radio to interfere. And that ruins it for all of us. So we're pretty serious about making sure that interference is not out there, such as music, profanity, which is all against FCC rules, or interfering with another fellow ham with deliberate interference. There's technical and fingerprinting mechanisms here where we can track them down, warn them. They ignore it, go to the FCC. And I won't say anything more about that. It's unfortunate, but you got to have it. Okay, just a little about procedures. I think most of you know this or are familiar with for the new hams. I won't read it all, but I always try to listen before transmitting, particularly on a net like the Vagabond net. There's a lot of enthusiasm myself to try to get in if you're mobile before you get out of range. Make sure you're not transmitting on top of somebody else. It's usually not intentional, it's accidental. They can't hear them, but try to listen first before you go back in. That's why we have courtesy tones on there. When you hear a beep, then that means the timer's reset. You can go ahead and transmit. Keep your mic in the clear when not in use. There was a time about 10 years ago where somebody accidentally said on the mic for 147.547 repeater, and they were going up to West Virginia. Is that better? They were going up to West Virginia, and the thing was keyed up for off and on because it timed out for 3.5 hours. It wasn't their fault, but try to keep the mic, particularly in the truck, so it won't fall down below. Identify yourself. Usually identifying yourself, the FM quality is very good. Just do it once. You don't have to do it 2 or 3 times or long phonetics. You'll probably hear that on one of the repeaters here. Because just not necessary. If you're with HF or DX long distance, yeah, it usually is. And key thing, no profanity, transmission of music, do not conduct business on a repeater. Why? It's illegal, and the trustee's license for the repeater is in jeopardy. If your license is on that repeater, you're not here and there's a pair of people that are violating, playing music, profanity, or conducting business, they're at risk. We're at risk too. So please be careful because it'll ruin it for everybody. Avoid tailgating. Again, that's kind of wait a moment, like listen before transmitting. And it'll be appreciated, particularly during nets. Okay, repeater photo. Yes, sir. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, John. John is talking about broadcasting. That's one-way transmissions, which are also illegal. There's a fine line on it if it's amateur radio related, but not necessarily. A good example would be a few months ago, if somebody was broadcasting, they have some something to sell, even something to give away. They weren't transmitting to anybody, they were just transmitting on a repeater. So try to be careful. If in doubt, either ask or don't do it. But again, we're trying to preserve the repeater, the amateur license, and the club for everybody's use.
Some of it's kind of legal with the ARL bulletin.
Right. That's a good point, Jerry. There's a news bulletin that's legal. Where if it's donating pets or saying I have a TV or something like that, which has been on there. You know, we got to be careful. Most folks are aware of that, but sometimes you may want to gently get in there and remind somebody. And if at all possible, try to call them on the phone so we would not embarrass them. Yes, sir.
That's a help for people who are starting out. Google is right.
Yes, it is.
Google protocol.
That's excellent. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. And that's a good thing to do if you're first starting off, or to ask somebody, or even in a club here, you know, say later on, do I give my call 3 times, or just say this is WB9SZL listening? And that's sufficient on a repeater. Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah, that wouldn't be broadcasting in that particular case. You'd say this is, yeah. That, as somebody mentioned here, I think it was John, health and welfare. We're here for amateur radio. They don't always put it in the books like they did decades ago, but it's for fellowship, goodwill, health and welfare, and advancement of the technical art. For instance, the auto patch, before they had cell phones, hams were doing that. There's nothing new to hams, but yeah, a lot of it's common sense, or you could ask. But if it's trying to sell something or donate or advertise something, that, particularly if it's not ham related, you know, there may be a question there. But that's legitimate. Yes, sir. Yes, it is. And if I said that, that's, you know, my mistake.
They relaxed the
Mm-hmm. Right. That's a change of, what, 15 years ago or so? Something like that. Okay. This is kind of an area for, tell me to see site pictures. Oh. Things don't always go as planned. David and I went up to Baptist Hospital, the penthouse, and things are very neat up there. We have a separate cage for maintaining things, and we generally lug up equipment, and you plan everything out the best you can, let security know, and budget time with your spouse, saying, I'm only going to be up there an hour and a half, so when you come back 6 hours later, you know, it's going to happen. Well, we walked up there and went through when we found out they changed the elevator key to go to the penthouse, but it opened up the right way. We went to go to our cage and get some equipment in. Well, apparently they were doing some work up there, and they threw it right in front of the cage for our, so thanks to David, our prestigious president, he went up there and said, this isn't going to fly, you guys got to move that, and we got to be out of here. They did. They took care of it. So thank you, David. But, you know, stuff happens. I didn't know about it. They weren't expecting it, so I thought we'd share that with you. Okay. Have one quick movie here. Try to show you. Now, in the penthouse where the 6.4 and the 44 275 UHF repeater is located, if you can imagine trying to tune things with your ear, there's a lot of background. It's a machinery room up there for Baptist Hospital. So you listen very carefully, you may detect something in the background. Well, may have to do this one here. Oh, he's got it set. That's Stephen, my son. And then.
Welcome to Dale's neighborhood. Good to see you. Thanks for coming, Raymond.
That's the auto patch phone up there. bottom here, we have a MyTrack, Motorola MyTrack 146.64 transmitter. We have an audio interface right above it, homemade. We have another Motorola MyTrack 146.04, the input for the repeater. Both of them are modified so they can serve as a standby for transmit and repeat in case they have a problem. Here's our internal monitoring and squelch, where we do diagnostics up here at the site. Right above it, we have an Astron RS50 power supply. That powers the repeaters and the controller we'll show you in a minute. Above that, we have an old Motorola Motrack 440 transceiver that used to be used on the Piedmont Coastal Repeater Network, known as PCRN. That's disabled right now. Here's the heart of the system, a CAT 1000 repeater controller. It's a microprocessor, and we'll talk more details later. That's the heart of the system, to be able to control the repeater as well as external links and the auto patch. Above that, we keep a traditional maintenance log to record the history of any changes that we make on the repeater system.
Yep.
Right out of memory. Here's the second part. Here's the duplexers you'll see in a minute. Okay, again, welcome to the 146.64 repeater site. This repeater has a 6-cavity system. Each one of these is a cavity, if you can see it. 3 of them are used for the transmitter separation. 3 are used on the receiver. The reason for that, we transmit and receive simultaneously on the same repeater antenna. So we have to use cavities to separate the signal. Right below it, we have a duplexer. Actually, a diplexer. Repeater, and also puts the 440 signal up the same hard line to the dual band antenna. Right to the going up, you see the hard line goes up in the maintenance room about 30 foot to the top of the penthouse, and above that it goes about another 120 feet from the hospital up to the roof to the tower on Baptist Hospital. Now here's a 440 repeater. Now there's 4 signals going up that line simultaneously. Regulated supply along with a large heat sink which both serves to cool the rectifiers for the power supply and the solid state equipment for the transmitter. Below that we have the small version of 440, the duplexers in here. Those used to separate the transmit and receive signal and go out one coax connection. In this area we have the controller. Below it, the receiver and transmitter are integrated. Has been heavily modified, and for maintenance it's set up on a rack, so we can pull it out and open it up. Couldn't get it open. So we're testing on the bottom. On the controller board and modifications back in the link for the system. Since this is energized, there's power. I'm trying to be careful so we don't short it out. Cap it back up and slide it back into position. I mentioned the cover is off this as well, so we try to keep some of the dirt out of here since it's a pretty dirty environment up here. Okay. Am I still in the bounds here, David? Okay, this one I don't think I had a movie on. One of these. Nope, it's the other one. See if it'll let me get out of it. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, that's kind of a dark picture of the Sourtown Mountain shack. That's all ours, where we used to be, and the repeater cabinet. We'll have a better view of it later. There was also WXI microwave steering equipment in there before the Nextel refarming took place, and then they took that out. We had the building to ourselves. Until in December, Shal Butt called home, the President CEO of WXI, and says, Dale, I'm sorry. Guys got to get, and gals got to get your equipment out of there. We're going to have some major construction work up on the mountain. So the FARTS team got together, and we took the antenna, the cables, the tower, and everything down, and took it to Jerry's fire tower and put it there temporarily for a while. So hopefully we'll be able to get up there on the mountain within, let's see, it's been about 6 months, maybe another 18 months or less. We've got another site I'll show you in a minute on Sourtown Mountain. Thanks again to Jerry and his coordination. Appreciate it, Jerry. Yeah. Here's the shack. I didn't realize that was the next thing. And notice our shack is quite a bit wider than it once was because I expanded the picture. But it's really not 20 feet. And the standby tower that was next to it, which incidentally is gone now. And that's our repeater tower, 30 foot. And we had at that time, a station master antenna and then a link antenna on there. The link antenna is still there. And we put another 10 feet, a new tower up, and a DB224E full to dipole on there. It was up there about 2 years before we had to take it down. Now it's up at the other tower, which I'll show you in a minute. By the way, that standby tower was about 300 some feet. The 800-foot tower is just behind it. And you can see some other government facilities up there in the same area, a repeater in the background. Okay, here's a picture of the original 145/47 repeater. This power supply got hit by lightning. That's replaced by a big power supply at the top, a 70 amp power supply, so that works extremely well. We have our remote link receiver up there for controlling the system, and a set of MyTrack transmitter and receiver. That's since been replaced by a Kenwood TRK 750, which is working very well. And it also has it's a modified DSP, digital signal processing in there. So if you have somebody with a naturally weak voice, it'll bring it up to a certain level, it'll digitize it. If you have somebody that's naturally has a very loud voice up here, it'll bring it down and normalize it so everybody sounds the same. And the DSP's been working pretty well. It's a special algorithm that's been put into that system. There's a UPS, very small one. You might recognize it for some of your computers. And let's see, that's the CAT controller, the brains of the system. All our repeaters have CAT controllers except the 145/47 has two, a primary and secondary controller. So if one got hit by lightning, which it did 2 years ago, through telemetry, we can go ahead and go to the primary system, which we operated on a year, and that saved the repeater. And here's our friends at Cavities. We only have 4 of them up on the 145/47 system. That wasn't enough with all the interference. There's a lot of signals up there. I had another set of 6 cavities in a box outside, so it was running 3 on transmit and 5 on receive to try to get rid of that interference. So I don't think I have a picture of that in there. Okay, here's the large 820-foot tower, the standby tower, WXII. We got blessed with a clear day then. It's not always like that going up there. There's that repeater building. I don't know if that one was, let me see if that was the movie. Yeah, short one. No sound, I think, or I was just tired that day, whatever it was. That was a short one. Okay. It's supposed to show a new power supply. It's actually the old one. Okay, temporary sites. There's two of them. The fire tower at Midway, North Carolina. I guess I forgot to take the brace out there. It was on the other side, truncated. And then Saratown Mountain, where we are now. Okay, here's Jerry's prestigious fire tower. It's what up there is was an existing station master, and then our antenna was right there. I'll show you a picture of it in a moment. And again, from the 110-foot level, worked pretty good, I think, from there. And David and I and Jim, I think, hung out there a bit on that little piece, trying to sway it in. And fortunately, we didn't fall off, but came awful close. Okay, here's the antenna we put up. Again, thanks to Jerry, we had a 10-foot, actually, thanks to Harlan, that was our EC antenna, right? ARES antenna. And not quite the view from Saratown. This is only 110 feet. Doesn't look like much, but looking down at the surrounding houses and the road there. And we had some other animals up there at the same time you could see as well. Let's see. Okay, now here's the new Saratown Mountain site. This is still, the repeater's up there right now. It's down the mountain a bit. We were at 2520 before. I don't have all the specs on it. We're probably in altitude. We're probably down, what, about another 50 or 70 feet, maybe? Yeah, but we'll make up for it. Here's the tower we're on. 280-foot tower, I believe. It's got 10 antennas on it. And we're actually up at the about the 170-foot level. And we had to get the antenna up there, and we're looking for volunteers, and it was tough, but we knew we needed to get it up for the club. So I just want to let you know, and you can give a round of applause to our president. He's right there.
That's not me.
Take a look. There's a Honda Jet. Who else wears a Honda Jet cap in here? So, David, thank you very much. That's David swinging over there, and for a quick release down, there's the rope. No, actually, that's not him. We had to hire a tower crew to get up there because of the insurance regulations as a commercial tower. But I couldn't resist doing that, so. But that's a long way up there, as you can see from here. And it was kind of a cloudy day. That was the rope come down, and actually got up there, and the guy found, tower climber found one coax going to a T and a couple antennas. Not really good way to, well, I shouldn't say. That would not have been our first choice as a design. I guess that's the best way to put it. But receive antennas for a neighboring repeater in area at the top, and ours is about 170 feet, so works pretty good. I think most of you have found a range here lately that works well from the temporary site. Here's the insulator on that tower. Pretty big, pretty good size. That's a glass insulator. Needs a little painting on that, but you know, we're not complaining. The ground wire probably could be a little heavier. Maybe it was at one time. Let's see. That's looking up underneath. Kind of like that picture. That's standing right in the middle and shooting right up. So, but that. Yeah, that's your quad beam. Okay, the current status, I'll try to pick it up a bit. It's about Saratown Mountain, about 23 miles north of Winston-Salem. It's a wide area coverage machine. We haven't checked, but I guess we've had folks from, what, around Burlington and out west. How far? I'm not sure. It used to be to Morganton, probably not quite as far, and down south. I know we've had it down 74 or past Asheboro, but I'm not sure how far down 77. Huntersville? Oh, great. Oh, that's right, you did. Yeah, thanks. That was shortly after we put it up. So this is the first phase. We're going to try to improve it, make it better. There's some things we've been up there, a few weeks ago, and made some changes to it. There's more to come, but please be patient with us. We appreciate your patience so far. It is operational. Pictures, that was a verbal description I gave. A lot of maintenance opportunities. And duplexer tower and antenna are in pretty good shape. We probably won't be climbing that soon unless we have something spectacular to put up there. But right now, that's working pretty good. except for the link antennas. We've got to do a little more. 6.4. This is located near downtown. I think everybody knows where Baptist Hospital is. Pretty much a local coverage machine, Forsyth County. It's operational, but David and I were up there on Thursday it was, and there's a rogue pager up there, 250 watts. I'll just say it's around the 152 area, so probably going to have to build a brute force filter and try to take care of that. When you have something that powerful next to your receiver, it's tough. That's why a lot of you can't get in, but it still transmits well. Same thing with the 440, which next slide, which shares that same coax. It transmits well. I think Steven said it was full scale at home in Clemens, but we probably get more than about 4 miles range for the receive because of that rogue pager. Not only that, I strongly suspect that the hard line going up, if you remember that picture, it goes up 100 and some feet, goes up into the upper penthouse where a large wall, 20 feet tall by 10 foot by 12 foot, was built with the coax, the hard line in the center, and it'll never see daylight again. I think there might be some nails through it, or it might be a problem with it. So Dave and I found a spot with the new weatherhead that's put there. We're going to try to run some more hard line, a separate line going up there, test the two, leave the old one, so we might have a separate link, run split site, see what we can do to improve it. So take a while to do that, but that's one of the next steps. Okay, repeater functions add-on. We're getting just a few more slides. User functions will be on next slide. 145.47 repeater has a digital voice recorder on it. What's that for? For announcements, we'll put special Oxcom, I guess I should have updated announcements. I'll get with Harlan and see what we'll need for Tour de Tango and other things, and if there's a special net where we can write some macros, Harlan can key it up and you'll hear a separate squelch tail. Last time we had 3 short staccato beeps instead of a small squelch tail beep saying that it's in emergency mode. There's a net going on, and it would tell you what the announcement would be. Plus additional, on the next slide, you'll see how all of you can use the voice recorder to check your signal too if you want. Echolink, talk a little bit about that, but there's not enough time in the presentation to go through everything. Repeater linking, repeaters can be linked together in emergency. When we had the 1930, what was it? A few years ago, we had an anniversary where we linked 4.7 and 6.4 together through Echolink. It worked well, except all the squelch tails are there and it was kind of annoying, so I got to rewrite the stuff to basically get rid of that. So when you go into one repeater, comes out the other, you won't know the difference. That's something to do in our spare time. Okay, repeater user codes. Use this with the DTMF. Remember on that HT, or that you have on your mobile mic, the back, or your HT if you have a DTMF. Key thing, please identify, folks, because if we hear a lot of key ups on there, the repeater will either shut itself down or we'll have to shut it down, thinking it's malicious interference, when in fact you didn't get a chance to identify. So please identify at the beginning so we know somebody's not messing around or there's a problem with it. You punch in 375 and then the DTMF keys you want to test, either on 4.7, 145.47 or 146.64. You'll receive those. If the repeater decodes it properly, which means your DTMF tones are precise and within the twist and the tolerance, so the repeater can hear them and they'll decode what you want, or a phone number, or a control if you're a control operator, it'll tell you the ones it heard. Everything except the D for Delta key. That has a special use where it stops an interrupt on a CPU for the controller. Just basically don't use it. So you can use everything 1 through 0, star pound, ABC. David was asking earlier, I want to know what time it is, but I don't want to have to wait for the hour to find out when the repeater says it. Key up and identify, punch in 400, the repeater will belch back or parrot back the time of day, whatever day it is, whatever time of day it is.
You realize starting at 4 o'clock every afternoon, that's going to be done every 5 minutes until he gets off of work.
Oh, well, what we could do is, we'll check and we'll capture both signals. So if that happens, maybe for some reason you may want to check the touch phone pad. It doesn't work. Just kidding. If you punch in 725 star, of course identify, and while you're keying it down, as soon as you let up your push to talk, it'll say start message now. You've got 16 seconds to say whatever you want legally, and when you release it, the DVR will parrot back that 16-second sample exactly how the repeater hears your signal. So if you want to see how low of a power it is to get in, and by the way, please don't do this during drive time or rush hour. Your other hams will probably appreciate that. But do a test at night or in the morning or afternoon or on a weekend when the repeater's not busy. And but if you want to change a mic, try a different power rating. A lot of folks will try a different antenna. Say, how does this antenna work? And maybe it's crackly. You wiggle the coax and you find out there's a crackle, or maybe one antenna works better than another. This will be exactly how the repeater receiver hears it on 145.47. The 440 or 64 don't have the DVR set up on it yet. Oh yeah, as soon as you release your push to talk, the 16-second counter starts. Thanks, Stephen. So you may wait a minute and it'll either won't do it, but it listens for a sample of audio immediately after you release your push to talk, and it'll be 16 seconds there. I remember, I'm pretty sure it's 16 seconds. It's enough to be able to tell. I could usually go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Sometimes beyond that, but you can play with it a bit and try it, and hopefully that'll help you with testing your antennas and your radios. Echolink, not too much more to go. Basically, it's a computer-based amateur radio system provided free of charge to amateurs to connect their amateur radio using to the internet using a protocol called Voice over IP, or sometimes VoIP. Just means in English to take your analog voice, digitize it so it can be bits going across the internet, and then undigitize it, the envelope, on the other end. Echolink is accessible not only through a mobile radio or handy talkie, but also through a personal computer. You don't need a amateur radio or a smartphone. There's roughly, last time I looked, around 4,100 Echolink nodes accessible worldwide, and that's on just about every continent except Antarctica and the Arctic. Was there a question there? Oh, it was John. Here. It was working great up until 4 o'clock today. I got a good question. I got an email from our contact at the Red Cross saying they made major changes to the internet service here at the Red Cross building. So we'll have to figure it out and get it back up, or I'll put the standby up at my house back on Echolink. So again, Murphy's Law. So
somebody tried to get it on Echolink the other day for this to talk to us on 47.
Did they get in?
And we could hear them. They could not hear us.
They could not hear. Okay. I'll run more tests. That'll be helpful. And I'll bring up the other node at home until this one gets, we figure out what we need to do with the internet here. And this is the graphic for Echolink. Basically, in English, if you have an HT or you have a mobile rig here, you'll go to the nearest repeater, and then that repeater is linked to a server with Echolink software. You'll use the internet as a transport to go to the UK or to Europe, maybe the Australia. That's pretty common. And you'll come out there and then do the reverse to a mobile or an HT, or this car can actually be a smartphone or a personal computer where you don't need an amateur radio to link that back in. The way to do that, the configurations, the controls, I'm sorry we don't have enough time to go over that now, but perhaps they'll be available during another special presentation where you could actually try, and we'll have the internet working here, you could actually configure your smartphone if you haven't already, or a PC or a radio, and see how you can get in. A lot of times how you could call up a node from Africa or Europe from the car, if you know what that node is, punch it in on your DTMF pad and bring up that server over Echolink via the 4.7 repeater or 6.4 repeater. Yes, sir.
Does that mean if you're using personal computers on each end,
You do need a ham license. Good question. Great question. To be able to use Echolink, Echolink basically will database. When you make an application to be registered with Echolink, your valid amateur radio license, They'll check your license, the class, if it's valid, and put it into the database. The database is just a fancy word for saying there's like a telephone directory on a computer attached to all servers, the 4,100 worldwide, to check first. If you're not in there, you won't be able to do a link. You'll bring up the Echolink program you might have downloaded, which you could download for free, but it won't even connect to the server. You won't even, it'll just look blank. Well, exactly like it looks back there now, because the Echolink is, the internet has been severed from this building. Did that answer your question, sir? Yes, Van. Yes, thank you. You still have to identify as you do with a normal amateur radio transmission. And there's some special things you can also do with Echolink at time, but there's not time to get in that right now. Yes. So, and thanks for mentioning that. Each Echolink node or server has a special code. Like for 64, it's 384157 is the code, and for 47 it's 420473. And there's, like I say, over 4,000 of those in the world. Is it? There you go. Okay, kind of a summary. Repeaters just extend the range of our VHF or UHF gear. Actually, there's actually a 10-meter repeater. It's not only VHF, UHF, 29.68 in the Virgin Islands, where you can actually key up when the sunspot cycle is running well. I've keyed it up with 1 watt. Talk to Virgin Islands, talk to Germany, and then the band will shift and talk to Brazil. Yes, sir.
Yeah, real quick back to the are there plans to I have virus vaccine or some other digital mode type of one? I've been working with a gentleman down in Charlotte doing Charlotte East that had a fusion all-star and EMR all together for pretty cool. Are there any kind of plans?
There are some plans, and thanks for bringing that up. What he's talking about is, the gentleman is bringing up other digital modes using our Yaesu Fusion system as a host. The short answer is yes. We're trying to get some of the interference problems and other things taken care of, but basically there have general plans, have done some work on the side, but haven't had enough time to test. We're looking at the All-Star system, bringing that up, which is pretty neat system using Raspberry Pis and be able to go ahead and link things together, or even to go ahead and simulate the D-Star, so you could use the Yaesu Fusion system and get things together. The other challenge we have, one of the key things is you need transmitter, receiver, antenna, and duplexer, and the internet. We have a challenge of getting an internet signal at Sourtown. We've got some opportunities. I think we might be able to get around that. And with Baptist Hospital, they're our hosts, but it's highly secure. Well, how should I put it? They're aware of security, and we're not necessarily within the infrastructure right now to use it. So there's some other options, maybe using some 5 gigahertz links to draw internet from here, if it stays up, or from somewhere else. So a lot of things to do in our spare time, but that's the main reason we don't have that up and running right now. Plus, with the Fusion, there's some firmware opportunities, excuse me, that we need to look at, where the thing locks up when the digital and analog signal come together, and there's 2 special interface boards put on there. I put Homebrew 1 board and it worked okay, but I didn't go down deep enough where it locked up down here instead of up here. So that's on the 440 system, if that answers your question. So yes, hopefully soon, or I hope. Any other questions? Okay. Again, please feel free to enjoy the club repeaters. If you hear somebody that's not adhering to the news, if it's possible to contact them by phone or offline and say, you know, you may not be aware of this, or we've heard this, that's something that's not allowed on the repeaters. If there is a problem, please contact David, the president, myself, or somebody saying the repeater's locked up, or we have some ministerial interference. Really would want to know any time of day or night, and we'll shut it down, because we can't afford to lose the license or have some other issues with that. And they're very rare, but when they do happen, it's usually a challenge. And I won't go into the stories now. Repeaters are up and operational except for the paging issues. The functionality will be upgraded when we can, and echoing configurations, we'll put that on another presentation. Just ran out of time. Again, thanks for your attention. We have great repeaters. We appreciate the feedback you give us, and thanks to Stephen and Raymond, who's not here, for their photographic support. And we appreciate all your inputs. So if there's any questions, I'll try to address them now. Great. Thank you, folks.
Can you get some lights back? Okay, John, thank you. Who are you going to ask the question to? It's not a question. I got one quick thing. Get up here and say it. Come on down.
Participating in Court of Tanglewood or will next month for the meeting that we have here. Be here 30 minutes early, especially the SAG operators. We're going to walk through the emergency operations for Court of Tanglewood. We'll do it then, and that way it's fresh in your mind before you get out in the field. So 30 minutes prior to the meeting next month.
Good job.
That was it.
Thank you, Harlan. No kidding. Harlan's done a lot of good work on Tour to Tanglewood. Please see him afterwards and get signed up because he needs people, and that'll make it easier on everybody. If nobody has anything further, anybody have any questions? We'll all be around here, and here's this thing. Do I hear a motion? Hit him in the head. Thank you. Enjoy.